Throughout all of the semester, one of the most notable aspects of media was the subject of remix and how it can be used to create new pieces of media from older ideas. There is some debate as to whether or not a remix is a legitimate form of creating art, and the process is considered by some to be morally gray, or even theft, depending on what is used and how it is used. People like DJ Spooky note that there has always been a debate on the subject of spreading or altering information, by stating that copyright disputes date back to 6th century Ireland when St. Columba got in trouble with Finian of Drum Fin by copying his manuscript of the Latin Psalter. Yes, copying something in exact detail does break copyright laws, while altering something in order to create something new is fundamental to the idea of creating new media. In some cases, people may even be influenced to use remix in order to improve any mistakes in the original work that inspired them. Sometimes fans of films even take it upon themselves to edit said films in order to meet fan demands that the legal distributors ignore, such as multiple fans' attempts at creating more book-accurate edits of the Hobbit trilogy as a single film, or how a fan editor named Harmy has attempted at combining and restoring alternate cuts of the original Star Wars in an attempt at recreating the original theatrical cut in an HD quality. Harmy refers to this edit as the Specialized Edition, since it is meant to replace the official Special Edition that made many unnecessary changes to the original film. One could potentially use these examples to argue that the process of film editing in general is a form of remix, given that the process essentially involves taking potentially unrelated clips and stringing them together in order to create a coherent narrative. For example, the different scenes in the Lone operator would just be random clips of footage without any meaning, had they not been edited in a manner that told a coherent story. It helps that the scenes were deliberately shot in order to fit together. Then again, this is not necessarily always the case, considering that the makers of Man with a Movie Camera edited random clips together in a deliberate attempt at creating a truly international language of cinema based on its absolute separation from language of theater and literature, and is meant to test what can be communicated through film editing. Whether or not the film was successful in achieving its goal is up to the viewer, but the attempt itself is enough to show the potential that editing and remix have. When used right, remix has the potential to be used for comedic effect, or even straight-out parody, as seen in how the following clip turns a dental hygiene mascot into a rapper.
Now, it's time to rap. Yes, a dentist, a tooth hygienist, a dentist, a rectangular hygienist, the black monster, and I when I bust out the motherfucking fluoride. Beautiful, it's wrong, you think it's okay? Sitting with messaging and tooth decay. It hurt like a bitch, you'll be coming my way. And that is when I get paid. Bitter brush chill for food I hate I do and all make a kill you who have a show. I search short when you get black you'll be back for more. Not twice but twice and I sneak nice. I'll take my advice and every day brush twice to motherfucking like get sliced.
The character in the previous clip is known as Dr. Rabbit and is owned by Colgate, and he ended up becoming more relevant online when a YouTube user going by the name Walrus Guy apparently got into legal trouble for using Dr. Rabbit in his videos, which brings up the question of whether or not remixes should be protected. Professor Lawrence Lusig had this to say on the subject of remix, and the vagueness of what remixes should and should not be protected as freedom of expression.
As long as he cites, he gets to use without permission. Indeed, imagine how absurd it would be if he asked, right?
He then goes on to support the use of remix with the following claims.
We need to focus the law on meaningful activities, meaningful to the underlying purpose of copyright, and copying is not the meaningful activity anymore. Right? Certainly, copyright law has an important and necessary objective in regulating efficiently here. Professionals producing creative work need to at least be protected for the distribution of the copies of that work. But the first important change here is recognize that even if this should continue to be solidly regulated by copyright law, this should not. This area, amateurs remixing culture, should not be fair use under copyright law. It should be an absolutely free use, presumptively outside of the reach of copyright law, so 15-year-olds don't need lawyers sitting next to them as they produce things on their computer. Now, these other two boxes are a little bit more complicated, There needs to be a mix. This is where fair use has its real role, a mix between places where the law needs to continue to control and where the use needs to be set free. But the critical thing that I hope, at least if there's some people here who are conservative, or at least talks to conservatives, the critical thing to recognize is that what this is an argument in favor of deregulating culture. Right? Deregulating a significant space of culture and focusing this regulation in places where it plausibly could do some good.
It is true that some of these remixes are notably breaking laws of copyright infringement, but as noted in the works of John Perry Barlow, laws that attempt to ward off the virus of liberty of freedom of speech in cyberspace tend to come off as a little more than attempts to make ideas to be another industrial product. Barlow goes further in supporting his claims by stating that cyberspace is a global social space that is naturally independent of tyrannies that seek to impose their authority and control, suggesting that attempts to stop innovation in remix will end in failure. But this brings up the question of whether or not innovating should be considered a legitimate form of media. DJ Spooky backs up his claim of supporting remix as a medium by noting that the earliest form of editing for special effects in film started out as Melissa's film accent, when a filming error made it appear that the bus he was filming morphed into a hearse and back into its original form, and how this mistake unintentionally created the first cut in film history. Melissa could have easily just tried to film the scene again with no mistake, but his decision to improvise off his mistake ended up changing the medium of film forever. In contrast, a writer named Walter Benjamin wrote that we define the aura that a work possesses as a unique phenomenon, suggesting that a media's essence cannot be replicated. However, this does not necessarily mean that an aura cannot be innovated and built upon. Working in favor of the concept of innovation, one could even argue that the concept of Tumblr itself is a form of remix, considering that one often reblogs and uses other people's posts in a new way. With all this in mind, it is clear that even though remix is legally gray as of now, its ability to create new media is one of the most important aspects of the concept of media. And even though some people try to control it, it isn't going anywhere anytime soon.